What's up, everybody? It's Joe La Puma. You were watching the Complex Sneakers podcast. As always, I'm with my two co-hosts, my two guys. To my right, Mr. Matt Welty.
Bright and early?
Yep. Very early. No, not that early, but we're here. To my left, Mr. Brendan Dunne.
It's early, but it's also late because,
Yep.
and I'll put this PSA up top as we usually try and do. We're actually recording this episode earlier than you're hearing it. We recorded this a week before because I'm on vacation right now, traveling the world. So
we're thinking ahead. We're thinking ahead. Okay?
Yeah.
So keep us honest. We're thinking ahead.
Yeah. And if some breaking sneaker news thing happened,
Yes.
as always, we'll get to it the week after.
Exactly.
Where
when he's back.
in the world is Brendan Dunne?
Yeah, where are we going? We going out of country? Just give us a hint. Out of country?
I'm going out of the country.
Okay.
I think I discussed it with some
This
people.
man's Sky Mile. Are you Diamond Medallion yet?
I wish. You know what?
Come on.
You know what, Joe? I'm not.
Are you going to be drinking sake on a Suzuki?
Oh, wow. That's where we're going?
In Osaka Bay?
You like how
He's telling.
we just referenced about
he's
me
telling-
like kind of not really
No,
divulging my location to too many people, and Welty just
Blew your spot?
aired
Vacay?
it out to
Little vacay?
millions of viewers. Yeah, I'll be on
All right.
vacation. Yeah, so
Wow. If
maybe
that's-
we'll do a little bit of work while we're out there.
If the hint is what he's getting at,
Well, look at it this way. If there's like members of our audience who go out of their way to travel to those extremes to pop up on you, take it as a badge of honor that they care about you that
You
much.
think
Oh,
somebody's
that's why
gonna
you don't
fly
do
to
it?
Japan?
yeah,
just
that's
to-
why I
just
didn't know
to see
that's
me in
why
the
I didn't
streets
know
of
that's why
Shinjuku?
you do it. You
No,
don't
it's
want the
just-
fans.
I'm just a private person.
Okay, yeah, I get it. I get it. Big week this week. Obviously, we're forecasting, but this week, Tiffany Air Force One release.
Yeah,
Have we came around on them?
No.
No,
I
still no.
suspect that opinion of mine won't change due to the time of the episode dropping or us
Okay.
recording.
I
No.
thought maybe.
Still cheeks.
You know what? Trinidad, in a recent episode of Full Size Run that we were recording, Trinidad James, our beloved co-host, was suggesting that come the end of the year, the totally biased and out of touch minds at Complex Sneakers would decide that somehow the Tiffany Air Force One was a top 10 shoe of the year. And I gotta because he felt the same way about us, I think, selecting the Louis Vuitton Air Force
Yeah,
One.
I
But
saw that take.
I'm saying this right now.
It's not happening.
We're not, and hold me to it again. Please, audience, keep us accountable. I will fight tooth and nail to make sure that the Tiffany Air Force One is nowhere near the bubble
Wow,
for the top 10 sneakers of the year list.
it's going to be a talking point.
Here
at
we are in
Complex
March.
Con,
Here
I'm
we are in
sure.
March.
Yeah.
Here's the chance to finally address it and then put it to bed forever.
Oh my God.
What's more egregious? If the Tiffany Air Force One makes our top 10, or the fact that the DJ Khaled Air Jordan 5 made the top 10 and how high it went?
This is an agenda of his.
No, it's like
I think a Khaled 5 has more.
But the Khaled 5 didn't make the complex list. It made
no
the panel.
on the sneaker.
I bet on the panel I bet the Tiffany will sneak in.
We'll creep up there. It won't be on our. I promise you, our faithful audience.
We'll see. There's
will
some
fight.
people in that Slack. I
I
don't
will
know
fight.
if we took a tally. I don't know. It's just you guys, you two. We'll see if it's.
I don't think it's just us two. I think other people. I don't think there's that many people who are super.
There's
into
people who like it. Some of our colleagues.
it. I mean, Zach likes the shoe, and that's
Ben
about
likes it. I like it. That's three. Three
No,
versus
that's
two already.
no. And again, I feel silly even talking about sneakers of the year. Here we are in the middle of March.
got a long way to
We're
go.
recording this at the end of February.
A
but
debate for another
You wanna,
day.
You want to
Yeah,
know what's
absolutely.
way better than that shoe already off the top?
What?
Those.
Bam
Oh,
Bam.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Those
feel
New
like
Balances,
you
Action
guys
Bronson.
last week you guys wore it on the FSR episode, a classic.
Thank you. Wow.
Yeah. Listen.
You're generous this morning.
Any deep dives from Action? You know, he likes to bring up some like deep dive
The
sneakers
cool thing was
growing up.
him talking about his mother getting
New Balance.
New Balances from some store in Long Island, right, Welty? Was it?
He had to talk about it just because of wide foot. I think he talked about that on his original sneaker shopping episode.
Yeah.
I love these. Like we always said, a lot of different colors, but it works.
Yeah, my friend Aaron helped out with
Aaron,
those.
thanks so much. Appreciate
Yeah.
it. Yes.
Good
Talk
guy.
about being a Crocs influencer.
He was early on the Crocs.
Yeah,
right?
Did
Did you bring up Babylon Meat Market? No, right? That's where he was for the
No.
Fuck That's Delicious. It's a town over from me.
Oh yeah. What's that place all about?
Was that the one with the steaks?
It was the one.
The
on
recent
the,
one,
it
yeah,
was,
where he
2
cooked
weeks
all the
ago,
meat out
3
on the
weeks
street.
ago. Yeah.
Have you been there, Babylon Meat Market?
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah, I've been there, but
It's a
that's where the
destination?
train station is, where like we come to the city. So Babylon is like right over from Bayshore, basically 2 towns over. Pop in Main Street.
Any
good
good
food.
sneaker spots there?
No,
Never have been.
no,
Did you see Babylon, the movie?
no.
Because this will be airing right around the time of the Oscars, I think.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't see that.
I feel like you were like a big like Babylon 5 guy growing up.
No. What? Remind me what Babylon 5 is.
It's like I guess it was like a fake Star Trek sort of show.
I've never seen an episode of Star Trek. How's that?
I've never seen an episode of Star
Really?
Trek either. Yeah. What about Sequest? Do you guys remember Sequest?
Sorry, what?
Sequest?
No.
It sounds familiar, but I don't remember.
We're on fire today.
Yeah, wow. We're really bringing. Do you remember this? Do you remember
absolutely
that?
on fire today.
Oh, here's a good moment. So this morning I'm coming here, right? And I get to where the train station is, and there's a
Not Babylon.
Not Babylon. Yep.
there's a 7-Eleven there, and I have to make a split decision saying, am I going to go into the 7-Eleven? No.
I love this.
Am I going to go into the 7-Eleven and get a protein bar and Gatorade, or am I just going to wait till I get to the office,
And
right?
eat some of the free snacks that are here.
Yeah. So I make the decision to go into the 7-Eleven and get the Gatorade and protein bar.
What color Gatorade?
It's like the new one. It's like the
There's a new Gatorade out?
I like the orange, but I feel like people don't like orange. I thought orange was the
it's
classic
like a
OG.
more of like I forget what it's called. It's like Gator Light. It's more of like a sports recovery
Okay.
drink than the
Yeah.
original one.
Gator Fuel.
Anyways, so as I'm walking out, walk past someone who goes, "Hey man, love the show," right? Which is always super cool moment, right? And as we're going into a long day recording multiple episodes, it was like a weird realization moment where it gives you the motivation to do everything we do. But if I don't go into the 7-Eleven,
Yeah, you missed that
and then
moment.
that interaction doesn't happen. So in the back of my head, it's kind of one of those weird moments where you're like everything like happens on purpose, or
Butterfly effect.
yeah, where you're like, wow, it's like if I just don't go into the store, I don't have that interaction, and it doesn't give me like that. Not that I don't have the internal motivation, but it gave me that weird internal motivation
You
that
were
I needed
letting off
today.
some steam last night too. What type of pull-ups were those? Save the video, please.
Oh, they're called butterfly pull-ups.
Oh, what does that work?
It's just meant to go faster.
Butterfly effect. It's all tied.
If
Really
you're doing the workout for time, it's just you can
thrusting.
do them faster.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was a late workout for you?
Yeah, well, we were in the office. We were in the office early
Been
yesterday,
shooting
Yeah.
nonstop.
so had to. You got to cram it in where you can cram it in, right?
Yeah,
That's
the
true.
makeup. Yeah. Were you listening to this conversation Welty and I were having about the value of pull-ups?
No. When was that?
This was this morning.
No, I wasn't here.
And
I wasn't around you guys for that.
Welty and I were talking about running, and you know
Yeah, you're a runner.
I'm a runner. If I'm doing any physical activity, it's running. And Welty seemed just generally nonplussed, or not, not feeling like that had any intrinsic value to it.
I didn't say that it didn't.
You didn't.
I just said
but
that
it just like just felt like that's how you.
what I said is that it's not like just being able to run fast
Mm-hmm.
or just being able to run itself is an overall gauge of fitness. Because say, and my quote was, say it's
This is incredible. This
say-
is
say it's-
incredible insight
say-
into how your
say
mind
it's
works.
30,000 BC, right?
Yeah.
God.
And you're with the family unit, and you're getting chased by a saber-toothed tiger, right?
Right.
Wow.
Joe, can you picture it?
Okay.
You can run. Maybe you can try to outrun it, but you get to a point where like there's a wall and you have to climb the wall to save your family, right?
Yeah.
You
Right.
can just run super well, but you don't have any upper body strength to climb over the wall to bring yourself to safety.
Well, if it is,
You know what's gonna happen?
Is it like
dead.
the Space Odyssey wall?
You think?
are we
What if
hearing-
you outrun it though forever?
That's not going to happen.
But let me ask you this: if you only do the pull-ups, you never ran to the wall. The saber-toothed tiger.
Who says
already-
who said you're only doing the pull-ups? Why don't you do both?
Oh, that's different. That's different.
That's the whole
but
whole
you
argument
just-
is doing all of it.
No,
I'm
but
not
the
saying
other
that running
argument
doesn't
is
have it,
one
I'm
or
just-
the other.
No, I'm not saying it's one or the other. I'm saying you can't just focus on one thing.
Got it.
You can't just sit on a bike forever and just expect to.
Wow. Well, look at the conversations that happen when I'm not around.
Hey
you
man,
guys.
these are the conversations of like actual value.
Are they?
Yes.
All right.
I'm I mean, we could talk about a Drake song, or we can talk about how you're gonna save your family unit in case like the worst happens. I mean, I don't know which one actually has more value to your life, but
the saber-tooth tiger is really gonna
30,000 hypothetical situations.
I mean, maybe with his travels. Yeah, maybe with his travels. I don't know. He's in some of the, but I'm
going on
not around
safari
them
for sure.
Yeah, I'm not around them.
Snowy day here in New York. I brought out some beaters.
Me too.
I was actually stressed out, being like, it's been so relatively nice in New York weather-wise over the past few months. I feel like I don't have a lot of beaters in rotation now. Like a couple years ago, it would have just been the same dusty white Reeboks, crinkled up. But I'm kind of off that right now, and I was like, what sneakers do I wear in the snow in 2023?
I'm disappointed because I have a pair of Adsum Merrells. They're like Gore-Tex.
Yeah.
And they're like literally at the bottom of my sneaker stack. And I'm like, oh, it's finally the weather to wear them. But I'm like, if I take them out this morning, like 17 boxes are going to fall over.
You didn't do it.
No.
This is also the weather that it's like it's slush. So like, the ACG Mountain Flies would have been a good go-to. I didn't bring them out though.
That would have been the one.
Yeah. I had these waiting at the office, so I changed into them. But I did Black Cat 4s, the beaters. You're going to see in the episode before this.
Right.
Yeah.
Another thing that I was trying to think about is like the shoe I'm wearing right now. We'll talk about it in more detail later, but Black Cat Jordan 3s with the Jumpman on the back. I'm like, oh, are these old enough to where I have to start worrying about them falling apart?
Black Cat Jordan 3s?
Did I say that?
Yeah.
Sorry, Black Cement Jordan 3s.
Yeah.
Excuse me. From the Black Cat man himself. Getting fact checked over here. But like,
although there were Black Cat Jordan
3s. Yeah.
But with the patent leather?
Yeah.
I didn't like those.
Not for me. But like, I don't know. I'm just like, do I need to go through all the shoes I own and assess which stuff it's time to start wearing?
No, I don't think you do that. I think you just
keep everything on ice?
No. When you wear them, there's a shot that it's going to fall apart. But I think it would be what are you going to do? Just keep putting your foot in shoes or examine them with rubber gloves?
Maybe that's it.
You just have to take the risk. There's a lot of shoes that I have that I'm worried like, oh, maybe one day it's going to, or when I wear them, it's going to fall apart. But I think if you go through them.
But do you think that there's grail level stuff that you have now that is starting to get old enough, 15, 20 years old, that if you don't wear them for another 5 years, that first wear may be something where they crumble?
Yeah, and that's why I think I curbed going back fully for shoes that will fall apart, grails that,
Yeah, no point.
Yeah,
you don't go back and get those old shoes.
I did a lot. I did a lot in the last few years, but it's just there's no point now. Which is like interesting because a counterpoint of like getting the shoe, we always talk about how if you don't get the shoes in your size, then it doesn't count going
for
back.
Collecting. Yeah.
But if you're collecting them and you're not going to wear them, what's the difference? If they're going to fall apart and you just want to have them, you just want to bring them out of the box, look at them, and be like, I have these.
Here's a I guess a great.
Does it involve a saber-tooth tiger?
No, but I mean, you could substitute a saber-tooth tiger for an actual tiger. So you could sub it for a car that's chasing you down the street.
Whoa, this is my real life, man.
Yeah,
You're trying to give me flashbacks here. A car was chasing me down the street.
Outrun it and go down an alley where the car can't go.
Actually, when I'm driving the Mini Cooper, I could go down the alley. I could do a 180 handbrake turn and just slide in there.
I would find a.
Welty, what was the situation you were setting up here? Is this present day or are we in 30,000 BC?
No, I mean, well, anyways, I think you should be prepared for any situation in life, regardless of anything.
Thank you. So many nuggets of wisdom.
Anyways, RIP, our friend Gary Warnett, on the Complex Sneaker of the Year discussion videos, he had made a comment
this is 2013, years ago.
2013, where the shoe that got put on the top 10 of the year list was the LeBron Cork 10s. And I think
I remember this.
I think Nick DePaula was making, who he loves those sort of like basketball shoes or whatever, was making a strong case that like this shoe is awesome. It's the best representation of a LeBron shoe, storytelling and all that sort of stuff. And Gary's like, yeah, but you can't wear the shoe. It falls apart. It's made of cork. And then the adverse part was like, oh, but you can get it and you can put it on your mantle. And he goes, what do I look like? Someone who owns a sneaker museum?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want shoes to just put them on display.
But like the Zoom Citizen, I'm happy I have. I probably can't wear those.
Yeah, there's things like that.
There's definitely some that.
Let me ask you this. When it gets to the crumbling period, are you throwing them away at that point? Or are you still holding on to them in a box?
If they crumble, probably throwing them away,
tossing
or
them?
if one crumbles, maybe just keeping one and throwing the
Welty,
other.
what
Just
about you?
can't wear them.
I mean, I'll keep the shoe. I'm not going to toss it. Like I'm
Yeah.
not going to do that. But I'm just not going to spend my time, energy, and resources on things that like aren't going to add any value to my sneaker experience or whatever you want to
To
call
be
it.
honest, like I always think of like if I was ever to film my collection one day, I want to have these too.
Yeah.
Even if they're falling apart.
Yeah,
even if I could just bring it out and it's not my size.
I mean, maybe 20 years down the road where like I'm not living in a 2-bedroom apartment and have all this sort of space where like maybe things are more spread out and the sneaker boxes aren't all stacked up. But at this point, just getting some sort of shoe that I can't wear or like never will wear and just like stuffing it in the bottom of a pile that like maybe someone comes over my apartment and like I'm like yank it out and everything falls over and be like, hey, look at this old pair of shoes that I can't wear. Like, or just take a picture of it and put it on Instagram. Like, that's really the only worth you have of it.
I mean, it's these moments that make you question, what are we really doing?
Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah. Because there's definitely at least one, and I've probably spoken about them on here before, but like an OG black and neon pair of Air Max 97s I have that are just crumbled.
Yeah.
And the box is sitting there, but I'm not going to throw them out. Like I paid money for these at one point, you know?
That's fine. I just think like chasing those things is like your number one priority is like your time's misplaced. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I also think if you have a display or like you said, if you have like a closet that you could display them, it's different.
Yeah.
You know?
But it's even like it's shifting up the timeline for the stuff that you could reasonably go back and get. Of like, there's a bunch of Air Max 1s I want from the first part of the last decade, you know, Pada Para, Cherrywood Air Max 1s. Are we getting to the point on the timeline where spending money on even something like that is not going to be worth it?
Maybe.
I mean, for me, it's not going to be worth it because those shoes are too expensive at this point. But imagine you buy a shoe from that recent of a period and it crumbles on you.
Some people, like, they really, like, get off on the sneaker side of, like, having all that sort of stuff. And I totally get that. Like, there's certain people who, like, want to be, like, vintage historians. And,
our friend Kevin Loister.
Yeah, and I totally get that. That's
really
like what their thing is. Like their whole like thing that satisfies them within shoes is hunting down these grails and getting all of that, right? But then if that's not you, you know, like if that's not your MO, I feel like when early on in shoes, you want to get all these rare shoes and you want to collect all your grails and all that sort of stuff.
You want to be the guy who owns 600 pieces.
But I feel like maybe as time goes on and you've been collecting sneakers for 20 years, like the reality starts to set in on all of it where you're like, hey, you know what? I already have a couple hundred pairs of shoes. Not that I don't need anymore, but like maybe I should get the things that I want, or maybe
your habits change,
or maybe I don't need to buy as much, or maybe there's other things in life that I can focus on and still be all about sneakers, but not have my whole life revolve around chasing down a pair of shoes from like 1992.
Yeah.
Or like 10 a year.
10 a year, is that the number you're giving yourself?
Like, just think of
10
like
new ones or 10 old ones
10
or
new
10
ones
total?
a year. No, like stop going back and getting older ones and just getting 10 a year.
And it's just all 10 of the shoes from the complex sneakers.
Yeah, like that's an interesting experiment, honestly. It's like 10 a year, this like, you know, and then if you want 10 new ones a year, I think.
And I think
that sounds like a lot though, right? Or no, it's not.
If you're buying like $3,000 grails,
right?
Like,
no, it wouldn't be like that.
You're talking about new releases.
Yeah, if it's like new releases.
I bet I could limit myself to 10 new releases.
And then you have maybe like 25.
And you have so many other shoes that you don't realize that you don't wear.
Oh,
you know,
so
and
many.
it's just like so many shoes you can cycle through.
There's so many.
But I think it's one of the quotes like early on, and when we started writing about shoes that I always kind of go back to, where it's like the amount of shoes that you own doesn't like define like how big of a sneakerhead you are like all the time.
Yeah.
Like you can be someone who has like 300 pairs of shoes, but your whole experience with sneakers is just going into Foot Locker every weekend and picking something off the shelf and like not really knowing what it is and just throwing it randomly in the pile. And you can be a person who only owns 8 pairs of shoes, but every single shoe, you know, every single tidbit and every facet and like you value everything you wear. And I would argue that person only has the 8 pair of shoes is a bigger sneakerhead than the person who's just like addicted to having a new pair of shoes on their feet.
I don't know if I would like you could argue it. You could argue anything. You will argue anything, which I get, but I don't know if it's like split down the middle. Thing I would say for us though, like for me, I guess where it's like tough is like buying a pair of shoes for an episode outward facing changes everything.
For work.
Yeah, like I may only wear them once or twice, but I know it's for an episode that like means a lot to me.
And especially we feel compelled to wear a different pair of shoes every week.
But it would be interesting to do 10. Like, you throw in like a new Solomon, you throw in these, you throw in a Jordan that you really want for the year, a Dunk that you really want for the year.
Should we do that challenge?
How would we do that?
I mean, have you kept track of how many new shoes you bought this year already? I don't think I bought more than 2
And you
pairs
can't
of
go
shoes
back
this
and
year
get
so far.
older ones. That's the thing. New releases.
Yeah, I could do that.
That'd be interesting to do. Maybe as we get older.
We're certainly getting older.
Yep.
Yeah, but we're still here.
Yeah, we're still here. We're not going anywhere other than occasionally on vacation where I am now.
Which
But
enjoy.
you know who else is here? We have a very special guest with us today. I kind of made this comment a couple weeks back
Yeah, I
about
know,
we need more
exactly.
execs on the show. You know, we
Yeah.
need the head honchos, the captains of industry in this thing to come by. We're still missing somebody big from Nike.
Okay.
A lot of the other brands have given us their time, and we have somebody today who's giving us his time.
Absolutely. Our guest on today's podcast is an executive whose expertise led him to hold titles of the president of event ticket juggernaut StubHub before going on to become the senior vice president of the U.S. arm of eBay. In 2019, his latest job brought him front and center into the sneaker marketplace when he took over as chief executive officer of StockX. Today, we dig into all the recent headlines, the state of reselling, and more with StockX CEO Scott Cutler. Scott, welcome. Thanks so much for joining.
Awesome to be here.
A lot to get into, but first, let's start with what everyone's wearing. One of my favorites you have on.
Nike Craft, Tom Sachs, Mars Yard 2.0s.
You
My,
had
my
these-
snowshoes for today in New York.
Wow,
Yeah, Tom Sachs wants you to beat them, so
You didn't want to break out the actual Tom Sachs snowshoes?
Oh, right, the overshoe.
The overshoe.
That's right. That would have been better.
yeah.
You had these on courtside at a Jazz game recently, right?
Yeah, actually, it's a good point. I did just last week. The Bear showed me a pair of customized sneakers that he had. I was wearing them. That's a good call.
Yeah. We were paying attention.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Are you?
Did you wear these to curry favor sitting next to the Tom
Oh.
Sachs guy?
Yeah, they claim
No,
he's
I
the
didn't
Tom
know that.
Sachs guy. Yeah.
Oh, is that right?
You didn't know that because it's not a real thing.
No, I
but
didn't know that.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
There's this narrative that my co-host has kind of put out there that I am the Tom Sachs guy, or that.
Oh, really?
I'm
Okay.
Such a giant Tom Sachs fan. So
That's a lot of pressure to kind of pick the right thing to wear today, But
Can't go wrong with those. Can't go
Apparently.
wrong with those.
apparently you did it right. I my only thought was just, again, like we spoke on earlier, not getting my sneakers too messed up in the snow. So I'm wearing an old pair of beaters, Air Jordan 3 black cement, Jumpman on the back.
Classic. I changed my shoes as I came to the office. I did not wear these in the snow. These are the Action Bronson New Balance Collab 990 V6.
That came in for you?
Yeah,
right?
they came in. Shouts to Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
Shouts to Action.
Welty, what you got?
These are friend Frank Cook, Saucony Jazz 81. The thing I like is insole. It says, I just need to read it.
No, taking your shoes off.
Yeah, I know
Being
these
cozy.
don't.
Make yourself comfortable.
Yeah.
We have a guest, though. We
Quotes
do
on
have
the
a-
inside. I just
guest.
want to read the quote. It
Okay.
says, I know these don't go with all my school clothes, mom and dad, but I still need them. 7th grade Frank Cook.
Beautiful. Thank you for
I will tell you something about the Jazz, though, is that
the Jazz, the basketball team.
No,
or
the
shoe? Okay, yeah.
Saucony Jazz. I ran my first marathon in a pair of Saucony Jazz, and I trained in the snow, and it's a great snowshoe.
Really?
It's a great,
Oh, 'cause
it's a
of
great
the-
shoe to
is
run
it
in,
the-
and I
the tread
actually
on the bottom?
I ran the Seattle Marathon in those, and it's a great running shoe.
Wow.
What was your time, if I may ask?
Well, I my goal was to beat a 3:30, and I ran a 3:19.
Oh,
Would you
wow.
run in
That's
these
right.
now? No.
What's that?
Would you run in those now, a marathon?
Actually, I would. It was a great. I mean,
the
I
retro
trained.
pair?
I would train massively in those. I had no
Yeah.
injuries, and it was
Interesting.
It was a great running shoe.
What's your go-to running shoe these days?
I've been a Asics guy for a long time for marathon training.
Kayano or
The gel kind of the 2018s and 2030s. I mean, just
Yeah.
go back into those. But
You like the
I
plated
the
shoes,
Asics.
like the carbon fiber plate in there? You like
Well,
that?
like the
Or is that like too-
vapors. The
Yeah.
new
The
vapors.
insole, it's like-
I've run in them, and it's great. It's light and they're fast. But I'm not setting any speed records these days.
Okay.
Kayano was a big cross-country shoe for yours truly as well.
Really?
Yeah, Asics big.
Okay.
Since changeover, Air Max 270, but
Not an exercise shoe.
no.
But my first, as we talked about before, I was big into running and track, but I ran in tigers of all things. When I was a kid,
On your Soka?
my spikes were tigers.
Did you get
Red
sold them
tigers.
by Phil Knight directly?
I don't know. It's
I
a good,
know,
it's a
yeah,
good, it's a good
'cause
question.
you-
But I just remember it was a blue, like a royal blue and white tiger,
Wow.
and that was the spike to have.
Yeah, and you grew, like Welty mentioned, you may have gotten a pair from Phil Knight because you grew up in Oregon,
maybe
right?
so, maybe so.
I got to say also, I'm impressed by the marathon time, but before you came on here, we were discussing the actual practical use of marathons. And
I didn't say. I said what I said is that
Getting
there's a
ahead of it.
difference between this. All we go off it is that if all you do is run,
which
and
is
you
me.
Yeah.
all you do is run, you don't build up any physical strength, then like the running's almost like
For
not.
his opinion, not my opinion.
right.
The runnings for not.
If you can't pick up 100 pounds off the ground, but you can run a marathon, it's like.
Yeah.
Tell him the
fit?
story about the
don't-
saber
no,
tooth
we don't-
tiger.
No.
Please don't.
I'm just saying, if you can't pick up, if you can't take out the trash, something heavy, you can't help your cousin move his couch, but you can run a marathon. It's like, I'm not saying the marathon isn't impressive. It's just you need to be able to do both. That's all.
All right.
That's all.
Yeah, you need to be fit physically, but
Yeah.
running a marathon is taxing on the body.
Yeah, for those of us who do it well too.
Yeah.
So, pay your respects.
Let's see you deadlift.
Yeah, see, all of a sudden he does some deadlifts, and now he's Seth Rollins. All right, enough of that. We got a lot of stuff to get into. Digging into your history a little bit, I saw StubHub, which obviously everyone's super familiar with, but I want to ask, how did StubHub and that role prepare you for what you're doing now with StockX, and maybe if you could talk about the StubHub days a little bit, and the knowledge you got there, and maybe how you applied it.
So I originally came across StockX on day one, the very first press release.
Oh.
And prior to StubHub, I had spent almost a decade at the New York Stock Exchange, then StubHub, and then eBay. When StockX was launched, Josh and Greg and Dan put out a press release saying they wanted to create the next new marketplace based on the principles of the New York Stock Exchange, StubHub, and eBay. And
Who were they targeting?
And I sent a LinkedIn message to Josh, and I said, at the time I was CEO at StubHub, I said, there's one person in the world who knows exactly what you're talking about, and I'd love to invest, which I did, and I'd love to help you. And I had, been an advisor of sorts to them for a few years or 3 years before I joined. So. To me, it's always StockX is serendipitous to aspects of my career, but specific to StubHub, these are all marketplaces. They're all two-sided marketplaces, buyers and sellers. I came into StubHub after 17 years of its history, and it was a time where. I felt as though coming in, there was a lot of things that I learned from the exchange that I could apply to StubHub in the pricing of tickets. But it was also a time where there was an opportunity to dive deeper into the relationships in the industry, which led to some really strong partnerships that we created with Major League Baseball, with the Yankees, with a lot of the teams and leagues. And so I guess my time there was really the expansion of that marketplace globally, but also a time of partnerships with the original creators and distributors of the content.
Did you touch the sneaker business at all at eBay?
I ran all North American marketplaces, so across all categories, and so in that capacity, oversaw the entire marketplace.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if at that high of a level, how much you were aware of, what eBay's goals and targets were in sneakers, or what the tough points were.
Again, all of that was under my purview at the time. For a brief period of time, the StubHub then reported up to me when I moved over to eBay, because eBay obviously owned StubHub.
Yeah.
And but what was interesting, I guess, when you compare and contrast, StubHub to a listings-based marketplace, eBay, was just more that even at that time, there was eBay tickets and there was StubHub. StubHub being an organized, structured marketplace where here's the event, here's the section, here's the seat, here's everything you need to know. You can get in and out of buying a ticket to an event very simply, easily. Whereas if you went into a listings-based experience, you had to do all the work to try and find the same thing. So one instance, you could buy it in a second. The other had to do the work. And so that was kind of a similar analogy early on, I guess. in StockX was really creating structure around an unstructured listings-based experience,
right,
and turning it into a product experience. And then also very similar to kind of the New York Stock Exchange was how you put pricing, a bid and ask, and a marketplace aspect to it for pricing transparency, which is different even still today than really any marketplace.
I mean, early on you mentioned, like running shoes and whatnot, but how like cognizant or into like sneaker culture were you pre StockX?
Yeah, I was into it before. When I was at StubHub, people knew me for what sneakers I was wearing. I could date my own history way back to the pre-Jordan era. My first pair of sneakers that I could never get was the Adidas Top 10. And that actually was my first sneaker that I bought when I could.
Was that for playing basketball specifically?
Yeah, it was for playing basketball.
Yeah.
And I actually was $64 sneaker then. And we couldn't afford it, so I had to wear ponies.
Yeah.
Fun fact: the Undertaker's first good shoe, Adidas Top 10 back in the day.
Well, I mean, that was the sneaker, and then even as a kid, I played basketball, I ran, sneakers, shoes, and I guess in the shadow of in Portland, it was always kind of part of my life, but. I was very familiar with sneakers and an enthusiast prior to taking the job.
Yeah.
During that time at eBay, I think it was almost like a year and a half or so when you got that title, but it was like 2017, and I feel like 2017 was right when like the 10 was releasing and things like that. Did you see some of like the releases during that year and that time at eBay that you wanted to even more like explore more sneakers because that was such like a big year for releases, or what?
So when you look at marketplaces, I think one of the challenge in marketplaces is that a listings-based model is you're selling one thing at a time, and so it really represents one item from a seller. And there's a ton of friction to sell a product in a listings-based experience because you've got to upload an image, a description. There's a lot of work to create that.
Fill out a
and
bunch
if
of
you're
fields.
and if you're a buyer, you've got to do the same. You've got to search through all these things. And so releases per se on a platform like that aren't really a big driver.
Got it.
Essentially, have been better known for used things and used items, but one-of-ones. StockX is not a one-of-one marketplace, and it never has been. It's a marketplace where you'd say, hey, this Tom Sachs sneaker, we're going to create a product page, and all you have to do to sell or buy against it is say what you're willing to buy and sell it for. I don't have to do any work as a seller or a buyer, but it's very structured, and I can get in and out of that experience very, very quickly, within seconds, if you really wanted to. And it's just a simpler buying and selling experience, but it's also a very different experience than most other marketplaces.
Yeah, I feel like one of the things that really separates StockX from eBay too is there is, or at least there was then, the distinction. eBay now has its own sneaker authentication thing, but this distinction of we're StockX and you can trust us to authenticate this stuff, and I feel like that alone kind of asserted StockX as a cultural company to an extent of we understand sneakers more than an eBay is saying they understand sneakers. So just kind of like based off that alone, did you feel like even though you were a sneaker person and you're a person who had sneakers and knew the importance of them as a kid, did you feel like you had to kind of inform yourself better on sneaker culture, like why a Tom Sachs shoe is important or why we have millions of kids buying and selling Jordan 1s?
Well, I mean, what's fascinating about the market is the market tells you what is heat, what's hot. And so particularly as a marketplace of current culture, StockX should always reflect that in terms of what something is worth, what something should trade for. And, what I thought was innovative when I first saw it was more actually the pricing aspect of the product, because, I think, kind of before StockX came around, you had to do a lot of work to really understand what's the value of this item, and then all of a sudden
we would just go to Flight Club, right? Like back in the day, to try and figure out how much, or the barometer.
Nike Talk,
Nike
buy, sell thread.
But anyway, but having that place where you knew something, what the value of that was, and you could look at it in a price histogram, a price chart, and say, oh, this is actually what this should trade for if I'm buying or selling it. That was big innovation at the time. Also a big innovation to stand in the middle of a transaction to say, in between a seller and a buyer, we're going to verify this product. That's not possible in a marketplace that's peer-to-peer, where the marketplace does nothing to stand in between the buyer and the seller, which is still mostly the case for almost all marketplaces, even still today. So both of those aspects together led to a platform that was highly recognized and still recognized for, I want to go to find the price guide and what the value of a product is, and then I actually have a seamless buying and selling experience that's trusted, has a high degree of trust relative to other opportunities, was again the founding principles of what StockX would become.
How much do you think that previous CEO and co-founder Josh Luber, being someone who was super into the sneaker space, I mean, obviously he had the Campless blog where he was really invested in the sneaker culture, lended that credibility to StockX within sneaker culture?
Yeah, I think if you were to talk to the other co-founders, because there's a group of founders that that started the company, Greg Schwartz, who's our COO today, co-founder of the company. I think at that time with Campless, Josh did have a lot of credibility and still has a lot of credibility. Came in as the person who was going to be the front man for the story. And I think obviously Dan Gilbert was involved in founding the company as well, but you needed somebody to be out in front that had credibility in the sneaker culture as the company was really starting and growing.
But again, did you feel like you had to kind of figure that out when you came over, just in terms of like the sneaker culture aspect?
No, not at all. Because I mean, to me, marketplaces, relationship with sellers have really been just part of my career for a while before it. Kind of a different group. But I also worked really closely with Greg and Josh as they built out the company in the early days to say, hey, here are the things that you might want to think about from a product and a tech and operations perspective, because I had seen things at massive scale all the way up to the New York Stock Exchange in terms of what it takes to run complex systems at scale. And so, I wouldn't have been like OG cred in sneaker culture at that time, but I had a real deep understanding of marketplaces and how they need to operate.
What were the things when you first got there that you were like, we need to fix this, or these are the things that StockX still needs to figure out?
Well, I mean, if you look at the last 4 years have been an amazing growth journey for StockX. We've expanded around the world. I think when I came there, we had 4 authentication centers. We had just opened up London. Now we have 14 authentication centers around the world, in faraway places, Australia, Tokyo, Seoul, places in Europe. We just opened Mexico City. And so expanding globally was obviously one. And then expanding to the scale in which we're operating today. We're just coming off of a record year of trades, record year of revenue. But when you look at what that takes to support that, we're verifying over 1 million products a month on the platform, and the operations to be able to support that experience, that simple experience or that promise that we give to the both buyer and seller globally requires significant investment in the technology and the platform and the infrastructure to support now a globally scaled marketplace business.
You talk about the verification process and like how I think that it's tech driven, but obviously the biggest thing is also human driven. Like, how hard was that during the pandemic to like the human aspect of the verification process?
So the verification process has been a part of StockX since the very beginning. It was just simply the premise that we wanted to have a very consistent buying experience on StockX. And so we needed to stand in the middle of that transaction and wanted to create a model to verify every product. And so that was always the founding principle at StockX. In order to do that at scale, the verification is a process. And so it's a process that's both the people at the center of that, the authenticators, as well as AI and machine learning on the data of what we know about that product coming in, as well as all the decisions about how we get that product and get it to the consumer quickly. Scaling during the pandemic, we were obviously, like a lot of e-commerce, growing incredibly fast. And the stimulus was spent in many respects on asset classes like sneakers.
Yeah.
And during the pandemic, we opened up operations in faraway places with teams that we had never been able to meet, facilities that we couldn't go to, and on the culture and on the technology backbone of StockX. And we grew. More than half of our team members today were hired during the pandemic. And so we had to scale all of that during a time of exceptional growth and exceptional global growth. And that was also sort of a balance of frontline team members there in our authentication centers, as well as managing a remote workforce during a crazy time of the pandemic. So it's like this, the boom associated with stimulus, but also the challenges of operating a global company in the pandemic.
Yeah.
You mentioned StockX not really being like the one-off sneaker experience, kind of like eBay is, but I feel like one of the pain points I've heard a lot of like buyers and sellers kind of mention is that when it comes to like rarer shoes, when it comes to StockX and it's like an Air Jordan 1 release or, a Nike Dunk, it's like that sort of stuff can get authenticated by anyone who kind of knows about it. But if someone sends it an old Nike SB Dunk or like a PlayStation Air Force One or like a Air Jordan sample that you're trying to verify, I've talked to people at StockX where there's so few people within the actual StockX ecosphere who can like actually look at that shoe and tell you this is real or not, because the average employee doesn't have like the knowledge to do that. And some of the sellers have had issues where they might send in a vintage shoe and they're being told that it's worn or it doesn't pass inspection because it's actually just old and it's not fake and it's not worn. It's just how the shoe decays. But StockX goes, no, we're not going to sell this. We can't sell this shoe. It doesn't pass verification standards because maybe the workforce doesn't really know how to deal with the higher ticket rare items. Do you see that as like an issue or?
Well, I would say that, we have 300 authenticators, as I said. We have levels of authenticators, and we have a lot of authenticators that are OG authenticators that have been with us since the very beginning. And I would say every single day coming through StockX at any one of our authentication centers, we have the most unbelievable grails that are coming through there every
rare
day.
Old stuff, you're saying, not the typical.
Rare, but never, obviously for us, it's still dead stock condition, which means the box has to be perfect. There can't be manufacturing defects. It can't be worn. It can't be used. It has to be in its original condition. So we will reject items for failing verification that doesn't meet all of those standards. And so, yes, you might have that original rare. It might be crumbling. It might be in a damaged box, and it would get rejected by StockX for not meeting our verification standards. And what I will tell you 100% is that sneaker that's going to come through the authentication, particularly when you're talking about a sneaker that's, $500 to $1,000 or more, which we're seeing every single day.
Yeah.
It gets reviewed by our most senior authenticators. And if it might be something that's super rare that we haven't seen for a long period of time, which again is not going to happen that often, you can call any of our OG authenticators. They'll either look at it or they'll be working as a team to figure it out. But it is a rigorous process. I think if there's complaints about it, I think people don't like getting their sneakers rejected.
Sure.
I mean, they don't like the fact that, hey, this didn't meet the standard and we're rejecting a sneaker. And last year alone, we rejected 330,000 sneakers for over $100 million, worth of transactions that could have gone through, but they failed our verification standards. And that's, again, where we're trying to set the standard for what dead stock would be. And it's mostly because this is what the buyer expects. If you're in a one-of-one scenario, you might be able to show that buyer, hey, here's all of the imperfections associated with that sneaker. And you can have a conversation with that buyer to say, okay, I'm going to accept that scratch, or I'm going to accept that dent, or I'm going to accept that wear if you're selling a one-of-one items. But when we're just essentially saying like, this is a sneaker that is in its original condition, that is the 100% expectation, not even a scratch.
Yeah. Do you feel like sometimes it's a little too tight? Because I feel like there have been times when I've sold stuff and it's like a little stitch is like a little bit off and it's just a slight manufacturer defect. And I'm like, does the buyer even care about that?
Well, sometimes, depending on the variants,
Or like a suede,
sometimes with the variants, we will ask the buyer and say, "Hey, is this acceptable to you?" And we'll still complete the transaction.
Okay.
So there's still an opportunity if and it just really depends on what the situation is. But even damaged boxes, which is probably the most significant thing.
Man, sometimes Scott, these boxes.
It's
like,
like,
I can only keep the
it's
box.
also tough because the boxes when like if that was like for someone who's not really good with like deciding what's fake or not, or I'm not a verifier, but like the boxes crumpled and stuff, that was like the biggest telltale for me when I would see when some, even if they were turning it at finish line, you would be like, this box is off. But that's interesting. I don't know if anyone has a follow-up, but I wanted to know, how often does that dialogue happen between buyer and seller in StockX? Like this one, and is it like maybe two questions? Is it like better safe than sorry, where you may reject it selling on the platform than like it taking the chance?
You err on the side of just rejecting it.
Yeah,
and not
like
dealing
you said,
with it,
330,000 shoes. Do you think some of them were erring on the side of caution that and maybe being like, these are old or it doesn't fit our standards to verify?
We're just not sure.
And I'm sure that would happen, right?
So, I mean,
sorry for the.
Yeah, I was just going to say. I mean, it's a standard. Obviously, what we don't want is subjectivity around what that standard would be. And so, I'll give you just another example outside of sneakers. So, we had originally for handbags accepted what we called excellent condition. And that was a kind of a condition that you would see at eBay or others. And excellent condition meant excellent condition. It was pretty much brand new, and there might be some small variance, and it was tiny, and it was maybe imperceptible. What we found is we would go through that verification process, and you would pass an excellent condition handbag, and there was a minor scratch in it, and 30% of the times the buyer said, this is not brand new.
Wow.
And so then we went in that category, we went to, okay, we're going to eliminate excellent. We're only doing brand new. And then we saw our volume explode in handbags. So it's just more of what the buyer expects of StockX is that perfect condition sneaker. I think we do debate internally to say, should we loosen the standard on damaged boxes? Other platforms allow, for example, in damaged box. We to date have not done that, but we're looking at what level of damaged box is okay, because there's a lot of people that don't care about it.
Well, I guess here's a good example, like related to what you're wearing. So say like you have the
that box is tough.
No, you have the 2.0 Mars yard is on, right? And a shoe that you also had like the 1.0 Mars yard, right? But there's only a finite number of that shoe, so to find maybe like a 12.5, like an odd size, and you have the 12.5, and there may only be like a handful of pairs in existence, and you want to sell it on the thing, but the one pair in existence has a ding in the corner, but they're dead stock, they're real, and it's just like through the standard, that shoe's never going to be able to be sold through StockX.
True. I mean, it's true. So we limit, obviously, some market opportunity for us, and certain customers or certain sellers know that that's just not something that's going to pass the standard at StockX. But again, it works really well at scale because our standard is the expectation of the customer experience, and what I can tell you is that being on the other side, where you have just a marketplace where anything can sell on a one of one, subjectivity around those standards creates a really inconsistent experience because the buyer typically doesn't know who the seller is. There's nobody in the middle to make sure that things are right, and there's a lot of bad buying experiences that are there. Another thing that you would ask, like, how much do we intervene between seller and buyer? We're in the middle of the transaction, so typically we would, if we're going to reject a product, we've just rejected the product and it goes back to the seller. Sometimes there's a penalty associated with not meeting our standard, or they didn't deliver the right product. And then with the buyer, that would be just between StockX and the buyer, because it's an anonymous transaction between buyer and seller. The buyer doesn't know who the seller is. They just know that it's coming through StockX. So we feel as though our relationship is with that end customer, and that's what we're signing up to in terms of our promise.
You mentioned standards, but I think one of the things people know StockX for is like being able to buy shoes early, being sold before a release date. How do you dictate those standards then if you're not like 1,000%, if the shoe hasn't actually physically come out yet, to dictate that whether that early pair is actually real?
Yeah. So there's all sorts of things we could talk about related to a pre-release, because a lot of times the actual product is released at different times around the world. So is an item that's released in Europe or an item released in Japan or somewhere else at pre-release, if it hasn't been yet released in the United States, we would say no, it's been released somewhere out in the world. There's actually not a lot of volume of product that actually sells before the release.
Really? I would think
so
there'd be a ton.
we have a little bit of a longer time period associated with when you can deliver that, when the seller is required to deliver that. But what I would say is that the release date is sometimes is a little bit more vague in that there's a lot of product that's actually out there. And I think generally the liquidity, so to speak, of items pre-release is quite limited.
Yeah.
And so, but again, when you're talking about these releases, talk about the big release of the year last year, the Jordan 11 Cherry. Mm-hmm. On the release day, we'll see tens of thousands of pairs of those every day. That's the scale at which we're going to see these items coming through, and so we're able to set the standard for that authentication when we've seen so much in volume. Because again, like this process is our own process.
Yeah.
We create it, but when we see so much volume at scale, we're able to identify the aspects that we're going to need to look for.
Do you ever just go on there and buy a pair of shoes, anonymously? Do you have a burner account, a StockX burner account, just to see how the process is?
No, I buy and sell on the platform.
Do you have a burner account? Is your name on it? That's the problem though, because if they see the StockX or
it has my home address. So, our authenticators, I guess, would know. I would hope they would know who I am. But I buy and sell on the platform. I am what's called a level 4 seller.
Level 4. Okay.
Level 4 seller. But the reason I buy and sell also is that,
what are you selling on there?
I'll if I get a release or something that I've held for a while, I'll buy it and resell it.
Going on the sneakers app and like trying to hit on shoes, or
yeah.
What come-ups are we looking at?
Yeah, I want to see your sneakers
What's a good
app.
come-up?
Purchase screen. Pull the phone out.
Yeah, so the...
I hope it wasn't the Coral Studios 2.0 that I got a couple weeks,
Yeah, so I buy and sell, and it's mostly also to be able to identify things in that process that...
quality control sort of thing.
Yeah, I want to know how long it takes for me to get a product. I want to know where it's coming from. If there's a problem as a buyer or a seller with payments or delivery or something, I want to see that transaction flow as a customer, and then I'll provide feedback to our product team to say, hey, I was doing this and this on the platform. This didn't seem to work all that well, or it was more friction than we'd like, and I'm into the product.
Okay, level 4.
What's harder to verify, handbags or sneakers?
I would probably say handbags, only because sneakers, the volume that we see, it's not that it's an easy process,
right.
But I would just say from a volume perspective, the more that you see, the better the AI, the better the data, the better the information that we would have. Again, when you've got a data set that's tens of thousands and thousands versus hundreds, it's just a better data set to deal with.
Yeah. Scott, I feel like one of the things we have to talk about, the things that people come to this for, is this lawsuit with Nike.
Sure.
So Nike sued StockX last year. Originally, it was over this NFT program that you guys had, and then Nike amends the complaint, and they add in all this stuff about fake sneakers. Why is Nike doing this? What do you think is the real motivation?
Well, I mean, we're still in the middle of litigation. I'm really confident about our legal defenses. On the NFT side, we introduced a product that I think was really innovative at the time, and that was really creating a certificate of ownership in the form of an NFT of an item that was held in a vault. And the reason we introduced that product is that there are a lot of owners and enthusiasts of sneakers that want to own it and not necessarily possess it. In the sense that I'm a collector, I don't want it to go through the process, and so we thought it was more, it's economically friendly, it's environmentally friendly, and it was how other assets trade. You don't actually have to physically possess it.
Right.
The use of an image associated with that to describe the product, I think, is at the core of this. And we still believe that we had the right to say, hey, this is the product, this is the picture of the product, and it's in the form of a certificate of ownership in an NFT. And that was the original basis, I believe, of the
But you easily
of the
could have
lawsuit.
just taken the picture off of it and created just like a form of ownership that didn't involve the picture of the shoe itself. I mean, everyone knows what it is, and you could have had a picture of the shoe just on the website that redirects to it without saying you own that image.
Well, for fair use of an image, we use this on our product page. Every single product page shows you what the item is. So it's
you could use it in that aspect, but not have the digital ownership piece be the shoe.
Well, yeah, the digital ownership represented the right to possess the shoe, and we just said this is what the shoe is. So
what about the
we think
fakes
that's
part that Nike brought in afterward?
So,
do you know about this, like how they're actually doing this? Like, I know the first part of it was they were saying there were pairs of the Bread patent Air Jordan 1 that they acquired on StockX that were fake. Do you think that Nike was buying and selling them to themselves, or do you have any insight into how that happened?
So, I mean, I think that part of the story around verification I'm excited about is just the extensiveness and the thoroughness of our process around verification. I mean, and as I've said before, we verify every single product. Every single product goes through a rigorous multi-step inspection process. We want to make sure that that customer gets the product that they expect to be able to deliver. And we've rolled out additional protections where if in the event, in the rare instance that we make a mistake, that we have a promise to our buyers that we've got your back and you get your money back in that instance. And
for those specific pairs that Nike bought, do you know if they planted those on there?
I don't
know. Is that a theory?
I mean, to me, it was something that popped up when the lawsuit first had that aspect to it.
People questioning it online. Like,
if that was the easiest way for Nike to do it would be to list a pair and then buy a pair of fakes on StockX.
So I would just say if you're any user, and this would be any buyer on the platform, we have a promise and a standard that we just talked about what we expect to be able to deliver. And again, if we were ever wrong in that process, we're stand by what we're going to provide for the customer, which is a promise that you'll get your money back and we'll take care of you. And that's whoever that buyer is, even if it were a brand, that's the promise that we give to the customers, and that's been everything about StockX. So, I'm confident in our process, and I'm confident in the promise that we deliver to our buyers.
Do you think that StockX has a better authentication process than Nike?
Well, I mean, you think about it from a brand perspective. Is that for brands release product and they create their product, design their product, sell that product, and that's what they're created for. Most brands don't hold that product back like a bottle of wine and keep that product for a long period of time, and nor care about that product once and after it's been sold.
Right, once it's in the marketplace.
And so I think with time, that process around verification is maybe more extensive, and most brands don't have the catalog of every product that's been released going back, decades. And StockX as a platform has seen more in the resale market in this category than probably any other platform at scale. So we have the data, we know what we're looking for, and we've got the catalog of items, and that's what we do every single day. So I don't think it's a question of who's better or not at it.
Yeah.
It's just that this is the process that we go through for everything that's sold on the platform. And
I just thought it was interesting.
the resale market is a tough market
Yeah.
in the sense that you really have to know and understand who those sellers are, where is that product coming from, what is their history.
Yeah.
And then actually looking at the product itself, you have to know all aspects of that to do it well.
Yeah, because one of the questions that I had, and I have so many, was looking at this lawsuit, was Nike kind of suggesting that they had an internal way to authenticate, and I'm sure that's something that StockX is now questioning as well. Like, does Nike have a real internal authentication process? Like, what does that look like?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I know our process and what it takes to know that process. Again, you have to have seen the entire catalog.
Yeah.
You have to see it at scale. You have to actually know what you're looking for. And, I think prior to recent years, there was no also embedded technology in there as well.
An RFID chip or something like that.
That would be maybe an easier way to say, oh, hey, I've scanned this thing and I've got some electronic read on that. That was, that's only in the most recent years.
Yeah.
And when you look at StockX, more than 60% of the products that are sold on the platform are outside of its release window. So, and again, that could go back into the 80s or the 90s. And so you'd have to have all of the data associated with that product to look at it.
Do you think that Nike wants to eliminate these secondary marketplaces? Do you think it wants to participate in them itself?
So, the way I look at our position in the marketplace is that we have a direct relationship with a great customer set. It's the next generation of consumers. These are consumers from countries all around the world, and we have a direct relationship with that consumer. And I think more and more that consumer has an expectation that, I'm not going to get rejected when I want to buy that product
from StockX.
From StockX, but the consumer has an expectation. I see it on the feet of the athlete, and I want that product.
Yeah.
And again, actually, when this next movie comes out, there's going to be a whole set of consumers say, "Oh, I want that original Jordan." But that's the consumer. That's the consumer expectation, and the brand and the retailer can't deliver against that. And so that's the reason that we exist, is that this product isn't generally available anywhere else, and it's not available anywhere else in a structured, trusted way. Not even from the brand. So I don't view us competing with the brand, but actually providing a real good indication for the industry in terms of.
But do you think the brand wants to compete with you? You know what I mean? Like,
I think brands are focused, and I think this is across all brands, not just those in the sneaker business, but brands have had to move into a digital world, which means they need to be really good at app-based commerce.
Yeah, sneakers app.
Mobile, and you've got to be able to deliver that against a global customer base. So that means from a payments perspective, from a shipping perspective, from everything that's involved in that transaction, that's what e-commerce companies do. I mean, that's what the whole platform is designed to do. And most e-commerce companies do that better than brands. And so brands are now saying, hey, not only do we have to be digitally omni-channel, we also have a direct relationship with the customer. Well, if that customer has an expectation that I can get access to that product at any time, and I'm willing to pay variable prices for it, and you have to deliver that experience, marketplaces is probably the place where brands yet don't exist.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that prices are variable, inventory has to be always available, and that's not really in the DNA of any brand to do that.
Do you think Nike could?
Sure, I think anybody could decide to do it. I think doing it well is challenging. I mean, marketplaces are the most difficult of experiences to manage because you're managing content that you don't own and you don't control, and you've got to put your reputation at the middle of that when you're not the one who's producing it, owning it, or controlling the distribution. So you have a higher standard that you got to live up to.
Are you ever on the sneakers app and you're like, I think I have some changes that I could implement that could help fix this? Or make releases, not fix it, but make releases go smoother?
I would say as a buyer across releases, I think the challenge of not getting a release is frustrating as part of the experience, but it's also part of the excitement as well, that I don't get everything that I want.
Right. Yeah.
Part of the fun.
It makes it fun. I mean, it's if everything was generally available and everything was just there'd be no scarcity, there'd be no hype, and I think this is a very deliberate strategy for brands to release product in scarcity.
Yeah.
A real question I think people want to know is how do you authenticate the actual StockX tags? Because I feel like so often you're like nowadays it's like you see
people are selling and buying fake StockX tags.
You talk about Nike trying to shut down StockX, but are you out there on like the hint of like there may be an overseas supplier making StockX tags or something like that, and you're out there trying to take them down? Or
yeah, so the answer is yes, and I think what's great about StockX is now it obviously is a brand, and it's a globally recognized brand, and it's a globally recognized brand for trust as well. And so when a sneaker has a StockX authentication tag, whether or not it's a real tag or not, there is a higher sense from the consumer that, this is like a legit product. And so we have brand protection folks now that we're looking at those tags, and where those tags also might be duplicated, and there's counterfeit tags that exist out there in the world. And we're looking at all sorts of different technologies as now our own brand to sit there and say, how do we make sure that we can understand the provenance of that tag associated with that sneaker or that other collectible item. And as you know, on the back of tags also, there's a QR code on there that's actually linked to that.
Scan it
to that product. But I think we're looking at other brands are, as we're a brand, looking at other technologies that we can use to make sure we know, again, the history of that tag.
You ever have the urge to just step out with the tag hanging from the Mars yards, or no? Have you ever worn kept the StockX tag and went out?
I have a number of sneakers that I keep the StockX.
Do you wear it out?
On. I do.
Okay.
I do. I mean, it's
okay.
Yeah, maybe it's a bit of a commercial, but
all right.
I think I'm trying to think of what I have on there. I've got a number of sneakers that I just keep on. They happen to be more like a new release.
Yeah.
If it's just been released, I might have purchased it on StockX.
Somebody asks you about it, do you tell them I'm the man over there?
If I'm speaking to a group of students somewhere,
okay,
I'll have it on there. It probably decreases my credibility.
You ever do the off-whites where you have the zip tie on one and then the StockX tag on the other?
Well, I'm a huge fan of off-whites, and the zip tag always stays on, but I would not have our tag.
Okay, a little too much.
A little crowded.
I know competitor, but also your former employer. Did you see in the Air movie trailer that they accidentally left the eBay sneakers tag on one of the vintage shoes?
Yeah, there was an authentication tag on a pair of shoes. Yeah, in the trailer, Welty spotted it. They're gonna CGI it out there by the time it comes out.
I haven't seen it.
Scott, I want to talk a little bit more about the relationship between Nike and StockX, because, like I said, it's really interesting to me, and I think that a thing that a lot of people want to know about. One of the things that's been alluded to in the lawsuit is that at one point Nike considered StockX to be not only a reliable authentication partner, but also a possible investment or something that Nike wanted to invest in. Is there a period where Nike wanted to invest in or acquire StockX?
Well, maybe I'll go back a little bit further, because I think this is where my background and experience at StubHub is at least something at least I think about, which is I think from our position, we would love a partnership and love partnerships with brands.
StockX.
Any brand.
Yeah.
StockX.
Yeah.
And why is that the case? Because I think obviously we want to do our job well. I think we are part of the industry. I think we lend a lot of credibility to brands. And I think when I look at my time, at StubHub, it was an important time to create those levels of partnerships that actually enabled us to more at that kind of authenticate a ticket because it was integrated in that experience. And in those partnerships came information sharing, data sharing, customer sharing, and an even higher level of trust. So we are 100% open to the idea of partnerships with brand along all of those lines that could be economic and data relationship driven. So we would be open to that. Have those been a meaningful side, particularly as you're asking? I would say no, not yet. But I do hold hope that as StockX continues into the future, that we'll have more and more partnerships like that.
Yeah.
Because of our reputation for essentially what I believe is upholding the brand promise as well, that we're here to protect the brand itself. I mean, we want our customers to get the product that they expect, which would be protecting the brands that are sold on our platform.
It was just a surprising thing because I had never heard that before, and there was this illusion that maybe Nike was wanting at one point to invest in StockX.
I don't think that's ever been. I don't think that's ever been a discussion.
Yeah,
not to my knowledge.
Yeah.
How do you look at GOAT, Stadium Goods, Flight Club?
As companies?
Just in general, competitors, other.
Yeah, I mean we're all part of this same ecosystem. I think it's much more expansive than that when you look outside of the United States. I mean, there's there's Sneaker Dunk in Japan, there's Cream in Korea, there's Poison in China, there's a bunch of competitors in Europe, and I think all the other platforms have quite of a different take on what they're trying to deliver for their customers. I would say from a StockX perspective, our catalog reflects what we call current culture. So we obviously trade other things other than sneakers. So apparel, accessories, trading cards, electronics. And so our catalog is much broader than most of those other platforms. I think what's interesting maybe more on the retail side is that there is, again, part of our standards mean that there are certain types of conditions of experiences that customers might want that we're not able to deliver. And that might be in a walk-up experience in a retail location, or it might be a different type of condition of a sneaker that somebody might want. And I think we'd be looking at that over time. If you know anything about our retail locations, they're more of a seller drop-off.
Yeah.
So a seller sold
I know
it.
it well.
Yeah, so sell it, drop it off. And we have those, and we have one in Tokyo, in Hong Kong, and the Tokyo one's awesome. And
I'll go check it out.
Okay, he'll be
I'll be
there.
there. I'll be there.
Harajuku. I mean, it's right in there.
Give
right
him
in the
a
center
list.
of
Can you
everything.
give him a list of itinerary? Maybe
yeah.
he goes to the drop off. Then wherever.
Exactly. I was just there, and
There you
I was
go.
just there in November. It's incredible. I love Tokyo.
Of course.
But anyways, I was just going to say that our retail experience is more of a seller service to drop off than a buying experience where you could go in and buy it. Because I guess when we look at those, the sneaker retail stores, we just don't think you can duplicate the experience on StockX, because typically you would go in there and there's probably nothing that you could buy for cheaper than what you would on StockX.
Right.
But the only difference might be the time it would take to
get it at that's
versus buying it right there. And
price
you're going
is-
to pay a premium for it.
the prices in the stores are always higher than StockX because you get to leave with it, which
Yeah.
is on my show, Sneaker Shopping comes up a lot, but yeah.
Do you think that there's some work to do in terms of regaining people's trust at StockX right now? Because I feel like I'm going to keep going back to the lawsuit.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
When the lawsuit happened and you have Nike saying StockX is letting fake sneakers through, I think that confirmed for a lot of people the fear they had that fake sneakers were prevalent on StockX. And to me, I've seen it damage the reputation in terms of like how much people have confidence that they can go there and get a real shoe every time. Do you feel like you have work to do to rebuild that?
So if you noticed over the last couple of months, we've been very deliberate about communicating out to the customer that our process around verification is something that we've always had. We continue, and it is a process. So it is more descriptive to call it verification because we're looking at all sorts of different things, which is, a damaged box. Is it the right size? Is it the right color? Is a manufacturing defect, and is the product genuine? Just focused on one aspect of that, we thought was more limiting than the actual process that we do.
Is this like in terms of, because I know there was a thing where they changed the language on the website. It used to say 100% authentic.
Is it new in box now, or
we describe it today as a verification.
Was that in response to the lawsuit
process? It was just more descriptive of the process that we go through, not a change in process. And
it felt like a thing that happened in response to Nike saying there are fake shoes, and then it was like, wait a minute, nobody can really guarantee that 100% of everything on the thing is authentic, right?
We've disclosed out there publicly, just like I said earlier, the number of products that we reject every single year.
Yeah.
And we've been very transparent around that. We even actually include the top reasons for that rejection, which if you looked at that, manufacturing defect, wrong product, wrong size, are all rank higher than whether or not a product is genuine or not.
But this isn't about the ones that people have rejected. This is about people being worried that fake stuff is getting through, right?
And I think even early on when Josh was pressed on that, when people would say, you say it's 100% authentic, and he would be like, well, it's 99.9% authentic, but even if it's 99.9% authentic, if we sell 1 million shoes, that means there's still X amount of product out there. Is that the way that you view it?
I would just, the way I would describe it, when you look at the scale of the platform, again, over 1 million transactions in a month, in the rare circumstance where after all of that process that we've gone through, if we have failed the customer in that rare instance, then we're going to make it right. And I think for us to be able to describe a process of here's all the stuff that we go through to verify a product, and if we, in the rare instance, have made a mistake, we're going to make it right. That is sort of our, promise to the buyer.
Do you think the buyer believes that right now?
I think among marketplaces, StockX has the highest standard for what that means, and I think that's what we have got to continue to reinforce and stand behind. So the fact that we might be questioned about that, for us, again, is just more of a call to action of the importance of the role that we play for the customer in protecting that experience.
Yeah.
And that's what our entire brand stands for.
What happens internally then when, a fake shoe gets through, not wrong size, wrong color, et cetera, mix up in there? Like, so
A bad one?
Yeah. An authenticator authenticates a fake pair of Tom Sachs Mars Yards and then sells it, and now it's a whole fiasco, because I know we get it all the time, where people in our DMs and mentions saying, I have this issue with StockX, et cetera, et cetera. So, but
what happens when that?
Yeah, do you go to the authenticator and try to figure out what like, I'm sure you know who authenticated the shoe, et cetera.
We have an entire chain of custody that knows exactly, from when that product came in to when it was dropped off at a UPS center to when we received it in the authentication center. We know exactly the process, who's authenticated, and all the way out to when it left and went on the truck. We know exactly what's gone on. So in an instance where a customer says, hey, this product is not as I expected, again,
he's a pro because he hasn't used the words fake or Nike once.
Well, I'm just saying, so across everything, if a product, anybody that says, hey, this product, if this product is fake or this product is not what I ordered,
but just solely just talking about fake shoes, not talking about not what I expected, et cetera, but just the fake. Like, the worst of the worst happens, you authenticated and sold someone a fake pair of shoes.
Yeah, in that process, so the buyer could contact us, and it goes right to our customer service, and as part of our buyer promise, which we put prominently on our website, they send that sneaker back, and they get their money back.
Yeah.
But the behind the scenes of that is that we're doing a full breakdown of that product, and when we get it back, we'll actually look and see who authenticated that product. We'll go back and look at that. The actual authenticator, each one of our authenticators, by the way, they're measured by how well, like the quality of what they do.
Do you have like a 3 strikes rule or something
Well,
like that?
it's just more like those. You have to remember those authenticators. Their heart, their soul, everything they do is to make sure that they've done a great job, and they're super passionate. They love what they do. When any of a product that is ever rejected by a customer, it goes back to that authenticator to say, hey, you authenticated this product. We're able to look through it, but they look at that. So it's not just this black hole.
Yeah.
Like, it goes back to an individual person who authenticated that product. And so our team takes a ton of pride in that effort. And there are all sorts of technology and controls, around to make sure that they can do that job better. But again, we're, anytime that happens, we're gonna look at that product. But the buyer doesn't have to worry about it, because we're gonna have their back, and they're gonna get their money back. And that's the promise.
Is StockX agnostic about the gray market? Because I think that one of the reasons why maybe Nike is concerned about things like that is StockX can play a part in this process that we all know that happens, but a lot of stores won't ever acknowledge it, is that shoes get backdoored, right? I own a sneaker boutique, and I got a bunch of limited product from Nike, and instead of selling it to my customers, I'm going to do the easier thing and make some more money and sell it on StockX. Does StockX care about that? Do you think that Nike cares that that's happening, like this gray market stuff? Because I know Nike is invested in monitoring the gray market or shoes that get backdoored and things like that. Do y'all care about that?
Well, you mean, do we care whether or not a product is backdoored?
Yeah.
Or not? So for us, we wouldn't know. I mean, we wouldn't know.
I mean, if it came from
where that
if there's one person who has
an influx,
100 pairs of Tiffany Air Force Ones before they release, I feel like it's reasonable to conclude that it's a store,
Well, when you look at the profile of the sellers, it ranges from a consumer seller to sellers that run a business, to sellers that actually might even have a retail presence in a retail store, that might have relationships actually directly with the brand to get that product. And so we would have a history of knowing what that seller looks like, what their pattern is of selling, where that product has been released, but the brands are in control of their distribution. The brands are in control of who they distribute to and why. And that's their policies. That's not necessarily something that is a StockX policy.
The headache of releasing shoes in a fair manner.
But you could also have the reality, too, of like product being stolen and then sold through StockX. And I'm sure that would be a whole legal head trauma of,
Yeah. So for us, as a participant in the industry, we are not a platform that condones or supports or would in any way want to be able to highlight a product that is obtained through any of those methods. So if we know that, or if we have suspicions of that, or if we have sellers that have fraudulent activity or trying to act in nefarious ways, they're kicked off the platform, and that we would also work with law enforcement in instances where that might be the case.
Yeah. That's what happened with the Cherry Air Jordan 11?
Correct.
And what was that process like? It just what you just said, like you worked with you knew that these robberies were happening, and you worked with law enforcement?
We shut down trading of that product after those instances happened, and then we would work with law enforcement in the event that we had any belief that this product was improperly sourced.
It just seems like such a hard thing to determine, right? Like where did any given person get a shoe from?
But in instances like that where it's just so well known and it was a pre-release product, we had the product page up, and we just took it down and just didn't support trading of the product at that time.
Yeah. When is StockX going public?
So
I keep hearing about it. Every 6 months I get these little whispers. I'm like, should we publish this? People are saying it's finally time.
Yeah. So I've been in the capital markets for most of my career. Right now in the public markets, I think the IPO market is closed for all companies and certainly all technology companies.
Hey, you don't have to tell me.
Yeah, I mean, interest rates, inflation, consumer confidence. I mean, it's obviously a really challenging time. So all of those things need to turn for any company to, to go public. So for us in this market, we're focused on executing through this environment, building out our global network, investing in product and innovation.
It's somewhere on the plan, though, right? 1 year, 2 years. What are we looking at right now?
We've had lots of different conversations in the media around that ultimate plan, but I'd say right now we're just focused on executing since the market is closed.
Yeah.
You've dealt with so many industries and occupations that are like really consumer based, but also passion based. Where do you put like sneakerheads in terms of how passionate they are about like consuming and sneaker culture and things like that? You know, even StockX now has watches and handbags, but where do you put the sneaker consumer in terms of passion? And like, we deal with it a lot, like critique and things like that. Well,
there are a lot of different categories where there's passionate enthusiasts. Here, this is a really exciting place to be. To me, this is, I mean, we're all older than the core demographic of StockX, I think. I mean, our core customer, 65% are under the age of 35. A growing percentage of those, now 35%, are women. This next generation of consumers, Gen Z to Gen A, are coming into the market, inspired by what they see on social media and coming to a platform like StockX. And so they are as enthusiast as any group has been. And it's also what's exciting when you look at the next 10 years, this is also the mind share, the wallet share of this next generation about how they consume. And I think what's been exciting about this category is it's always been an enthusiast, but it's now actually people that say, well, do I want to invest in a share of stock, or do maybe I want to invest in this asset, this collectible, this item that can actually increase in value over time? It could be part of my quote portfolio. And I think that's kind of a different type of consuming that we've enabled. That's pretty exciting for this next generation of consumers. So I'm really optimistic about that.
Do you get when people say, I don't own a lot of stocks, but I have a lot of shoes that are valuable over time? Is that like a real thing? You just said portfolio. I've heard people say like, yeah, maybe I'm not big on the stock market, but I have shoes that are worth a lot and are going to only be worth more over time.
This is the part of StockX that I just love the most, which is you hear the stories of people who this is their livelihood. I mean, they're putting themselves through college, supporting themselves or their family on this as a passion category. So you could make a career out of this. You could support yourself doing this, and you could have a lot of fun along the way. But the stories of the type of people that are buying and selling and the economic opportunity that it unlocks for them is as broad as you could imagine, and particularly as you go outside of the United States. And that's where we see it, and it's really exciting. That's why we opened up in Mexico as an example, Mexico City, where there's just a whole set of sellers there that now have this opportunity to get the grill, get the W, and maybe make some money along the way.
Yeah. Last question I have. Sorry. Again, if you know me, I'm obsessed with the sneaker lawsuit, so I got to just check all these off. And maybe you feel like you're testifying right now, but I saw in there that, they had former sneakers boss Ron Ferris, who heads up Nike Virtual Studios. He had to testify, during Discovery. Have you had to do that? Have you had to testify?
For me personally?
Yeah. Have they tried to bring you in?
I can't comment on the litigation, but we're still involved with it.
You can't even comment on whether or not they would bring you in and have to ask you a bunch of questions?
Not yet.
Fair enough.
I guess last thing, when you talk about the portfolios and all that sort of stuff, and talking about the NFTs and people never wanting to own the physical shoe, I feel like that's one criticism that people talk about, where people who want to buy and own the shoes, like enabling that culture where sneakers are viewed as not actual things that are worn. They're just viewed as a stock market where no one actually owns them anymore, and they're just bought and sold, that it almost like enables a side of sneaker culture that takes the consumer out of it. Do you see that criticism?
Yeah, I get that as an argument, but I guess what I would say is that, you know, the sneakerhead who's got that collection of boxes in the closet is effectively holding on to that asset as a quote trader. At some point in time, they might decide to sell that item, and they may never even actually look into the box and know that it's there. And there's people that own thousands of pairs of sneakers, and I don't want to put any shade on the folks that, hey, collect, and they're collecting it for value over time. You know, I think as we looked at what we wanted to try and enable, however, is that the transit for those types of individuals that want to consume or trade that way, the transit of an item when you don't want to actually show it off, or you just want to actually trade it, why have it fly around the world, go through all this process when you can just have a certificate of ownership around it? And so I think we would really just wanted to enable a more efficient way to do that for that type of customer that's what they're trying to achieve.
When you talk to your old friends at the stock exchange, do you ever say, like, you know, I used to trade stocks, now I trade sneakers? And when you have to contextualize, what is this StockX thing?
No, I mean, a lot of my team that worked for me is still there at the New York Stock Exchange. I keep in touch with them. I think a lot of people in the exchange space appreciate what we're trying to do, because they actually understand innately what a live real-time marketplace looks like.
Yeah.
And even actually for those on the derivatives or the commodities side who say, well, this is actually how oil trades. Oil barrels don't move around the world for traders. They stay in the same place, and you're trading a contract. So actually, I think that part of my career understands deeply some aspects of what we're trying to accomplish. As well as, you know, those that are just the sneaker enthusiasts. But I mean, there's a whole side to this that financial markets have figured out, you know, a long time ago that we're, you know, just now catching up to.
Yeah.
Scott, really appreciate you coming on. Appreciate your candidness. And
I mean, again,
he's very excited when we have CEO.
Yeah, you know,
appreciate
it. You know, you're a busy man. These people who run these companies, like I said, these captains of industry, they're busy people. So when they can come down to our level at the Complex Sneakers Podcast and talk to us about what's really going on, we so appreciate that.
Definitely. Thanks, man. Appreciate you giving us your time.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. This has been the Complex Sneakers Podcast. We hope everyone has a great weekend. Please like, subscribe. We will see you next week.